The path of an artist is full of challenges, which has pushed me to reach out to other professionals about their experiences. Join us as we explore the journeys of fine artists who have turned their passion of creating art into a profession. From their highs to their hurdles, these are real insights, breakthroughs, and triumphs to inspire other creators to reach higher. Welcome to the Business of Art Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Business of Art Podcast. This week, we are excited and thrilled. We have our first sculptor on the podcast. And not even is it just any sculptor. This is Dave LaMure Jr. And if you don't know who he is, you're missing out. And you're going to get to know him a lot better. Anyway, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time, your precious time, to be here with me and to share some of your journey and experience with us.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm really overwhelmed that you asked me and being the first sculptor. So I'm just really appreciative to be here. Yeah,
well, it's been a long time coming. We've needed to have a sculptor, and I'm so glad to break the ice with a boulder. Yeah, we're gonna make some waves. Anyway, I've loved Dave's work for so long, and anyway, one day I'll have one of his pieces in my collection. That'll hopefully, if I can get a hold of one, right?
We'll make it
anyway.
happen.
I'm gonna just give a little bit of a bio, just some key points from Dave's history, and then we're gonna let him dive into his story and his journey. So Dave LaMure Jr. is a full-time sculptor and painter who lives in Magic Valley, Idaho. He lives with his wife, Jamie. They have 2 kids, and they actually just celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Awesome. So cool. What an incredible feat. He has been working with clay since he was 12 years old, and he has been a professional sculptor, potter, artist, fine artist for 30 plus years. He's had a long time experiencing this whole circus of being an artist, right? He specializes in monumental bronze, public sculptures, large canvases for his paintings. His bas relief wildlife designs are incredible. I think that's probably one of his unique things that he does that people recognize. He's received some incredible recognitions and notable awards, including most recently the 2025 Governor's Award for Excellence in the Arts for the state of Idaho. Awesome. In 2023, he got the Stanley Bleifeld Memorial Grant from the National Sculpture Society. And in the same year, 2023, he got an Artist Excellence Award from the Masters of the American West. That's the Pottery Museum, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
In Los Angeles, yeah.
Yes.
His sculpture Native won first place overall at Art and Soul of the Magic Valley in 2022. And this one is probably the most notable. In 1999, he was awarded Best in Show at the Weems Art Festival, and that award was given to him by Sophia Loren, who awarded it with a kiss. We'll probably hear a little bit more about that later. So cool. His work has been featured in prestigious exhibitions like Masters of the American West, the Night of Artists. He has several pieces in permanent collections and prestigious permanent collections, including the Idle Museum and the Briscoe Western Art Museum. Dave has a neat history. He was a former wilderness river guide, and he loves being out in the outdoors, exploring nature, and all of that has just really inspired him, and it inspires his work, and it speaks in everything that he does. So Dave, again, thanks so much for being here. Let's hear your story. How did it start? We want to hear how it began and kind of how it's all evolved till now.
Mark, I think we can quit now. That was great.
All right, see, folks.
I am a visual artist, and my primary strength is sculpting. So I can sculpt what I'm feeling. A lot of times I can't articulate what I'm feeling. So stick with me here. So
You're good.
I was inspired just through being a kid that struggled with traditional school. So I had dyslexia growing up. So I call it Lexdixia, but it was something that challenged me with numbers and reading. So it was a lot easier to work in a kinesthetic way or with sculpture or something physical instead of reading or numbers. Although I did get a business degree from the University of Idaho, but I spent a lot more time in the sculpture studio and doing art classes. But so it started out in Roswell, New Mexico, was primarily where I was raised. I was born in Nevada and then moved to Houston. We were in Houston for 4 years and then Roswell, New Mexico. And at the age of 12, my uncle came and he brought a bag of clay. And I had 6 brothers and sisters. And we sat down at the table and we started sculpting. And I wanted to sculpt an owl. And so I sculpted this owl. And all my brothers and sisters were a little amazed at me being able to do this at the age of 12. And so they were like, wow. And so I got reinforcement from the outside as well as the inside, but I sculpted this owl. My uncle was an avant-garde uncle that would always come around and he would do different things that were questionable in my parents' eyes with us. Like he would teach us songs and jokes and things like that they were like, oh, that's old Uncle Tom. So Uncle Tom was a great guy, mentor, and still is. I actually addressed him at the Governor's Award because he's had a huge influence in my life and just the encouragement of that. So
that's awesome.
It's interesting, Mark. I sculpted an owl, and this has come back. There's a lot of circles in my life. So things circle back and they keep getting stronger and stronger, these circles. And I realize, wow, what it's all about. And so my main focus is wildlife. And I feel like wildlife is a pinnacle of nature. And we're an extrapolation of that also, or at least that's what I believe. And so it's showing off this natural world that is quite fascinating that we have no idea. So I sculpted this owl with a wizard cap on, and I still have this owl. And at that point, I didn't really, I don't know what the influence was that I sculpted it with a wizard cap and why I wanted that. But now it's come back full circle. And I just wholeheartedly believe that the natural world and this little ball that we're on carries so much wisdom. And so I sculpted that in a wise old owl with a wizard cap. So that was the foundation of my spark. And then I continued to be interested in clay and clay work. And so I was in Roswell, New Mexico. And because I had 6 brothers and sisters, and it was very hot in the summertime when I'd go to the Roswell Museum, and they had a clay class in the back of the museum. And Ariana Finch was the teacher, and I would go back there and throw pots on the wheel. And I saw a little Japanese woman. She threw a big pot. First thing I saw, she threw this huge pot and it was spinning. And when the wheel stopped, the bowl fell. It flopped over. And I went, oh, I want to do that, but I want to keep it up. So for some reason, I was really inspired by the earth and this whole transition that happens in front of you. And now I really realize that when I sit at the wheel and I create something, it's just this flow that occurs. Like I'm creating the whole world in front of me out of this little piece of mud, and that really has come home several times. But I also saw in the Roswell Museum was cool, which was really nice in the summertime in Roswell. It was a little bit darker and it was very quiet. And so those all were very attractive coming from a hot, loud family of seven,
Yeah.
And I'd see these huge old ancient Anasazi vessels and pots, and they were under glass, and I'd just sit there and look at those and just imagine the story that they held from so long ago. So
yeah,
I didn't know that then, but I know it now how impressionable that was for me in starting out. And so I actually have a statement that is my statement towards what I do. I create wildlife art as a statement to the survival of the human species. By mirroring other animals and the natural world, I acknowledge our critical alliance as nature. So that's a big word, as. So my feeling is that we're aligned critically on this little earth, and if we take care of that and each living thing, and people talk about sustainability, but I feel like it's more about symbiosis. So it's a circle. It's a circle that transpires. So yeah, that's some of my inspiration and where it's led to, and the passion that I have for it.
That's awesome, and what a neat way to kind of pull that together with these deep held beliefs that you can see that's inspiring you in everything you do. Like I look at your work and yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. That's powerful. For the last 12 years, I have been a professional oil painter, and it has been an incredible journey with some really big challenges and a lot of successes. I've been included in some of Western Art's biggest museum shows. I've been featured in some of the top Western Art magazines. I've sold hundreds of paintings, and I've made a really great living. But there's definitely been a massive learning curve to get my art to where it is today. So I've set out to help shrink that learning curve for other artists who are on the same path that I was. I'm really excited to announce the early bird launch of my online course, The Business of Art. In The Business of Art, I'll be guiding you step by step through my painting process, going through everything from what materials I use, how I prep my panels, all the way to varnishing and framing my art. And I'll be going over the techniques that have helped me to transform my work into what it is now. I'm also pulling back the curtain on how I utilize Photoshop to efficiently get my reference images solid and ready to paint from. But that's not all. Understanding the value of your work and how to price it is crucial, which is why I'm also including my painting price calculator. I've personally developed this calculator over the last several years, and it has made pricing my work extremely simple and has saved me a ton of time. Guys, I truly believe that this course is worth the investment and will be a great resource for you on your art journey. But if you don't find the value that you're looking for, we have a full 30-day money-back guarantee. Click the link below, and I look forward to seeing you in the course. So when you were young from high school, like did you study like you said you got a business degree, but did you study art at all, or was it like what? How did that develop?
So when I was 14 years old, I went away to a Benedictine Catholic school called the Abbey in Canyon City, Colorado. And I lived there from 14 to 15, and there was a clay studio there. So I just fell right into that and enjoyed it. There was a herd of 52 horses, so I got to break a horse.
Wow.
It was really incredible. And some of that had to do with, just challenges at home and getting away. But then um, it was too much like college when I was 14. And so my dad realized that and said, you can go wherever you want, but you can't go back here. So then I went to New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico. So that was a huge shift and transition from one to the other.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I was able to do some art there, but not much. And then in college, I went to Carroll College in Helena, Montana, and they had a great ceramic studio there that I enjoyed. And then, and I spent time there, I spent time in the ceramic studio more than I did anything else. That had to do with Carroll College and then also the University of Idaho where I graduated. So, I spent more time in the clay studio and doing art classes. I took a lot of different art classes. There was a design teacher at the U of I that we didn't get along. And so I missed a couple of design classes that would have given me a minor in art. But I got a major in, I got a degree in business management. So, and I probably need that more than I needed an art degree. So just because it comes, it really does come naturally for me, the three-dimensional work that I do, and it's a little bit harder doing two-dimensional work, but the two complement each other for me. Like a lot of times when I do a painting, I'll even do a little maquette or a little sculpture to check lighting and depth and how to create some of that illusion of three dimension in a painting.
That's really handy. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's fun. So
that's so cool.
So then I got a degree in business management, and I spent more time in the clay studio and realized that was a place that I loved, that it was something that really worked for me and came easily, and it was blissful. I would be in the studio and creating all night, and Jamie would call me, or somehow she'd get a hold of me and say, "What are you doing?" And I'd look up and have 20 vessels in front of me going, "Wow," and just timeless. So
yeah.
And
that is so cool.
That's what I would recommend. If things are timeless for you when you're creating art, then go. If they're a struggle, then I would say look at something else. Look at those things that are blissful and timeless, and you're in a flow of not even recognizing how much time passes.
So I agree with that, but what's your reasoning behind that?
My reasoning behind that would be that really that's the gift you have to offer, is that, and not that it's always going to be easy, and there's all those different aspects, but I feel like that's where your greatest awareness, consciousness, whatever comes from. And we all have that. And I feel like we're a symphony that we all get to, if I was good at accounting, I would want to do that, So I feel like we all have those things that make it whole. It's even to the point of really, really determining what that is, what that awareness, that consciousness is for you, specifically, and even to the point where, and I'm going to take it back to nature, a seed hits the ground, gets buried, whatever. It knows, it has some awareness or consciousness to put the root down, to bring the sapling up. And it also has that consciousness to, or awareness to follow the sun, and it's a real specific way of saying, how do we find that? So that's what it is for me,
I love that. I agree with you. I think that each of us have something that's uniquely ours to give. And yeah, you find that thing that just brings you joy, and that, you can just lose yourself in, there's, you step back and you kind of wake up to reality and like, wow, I didn't realize that it was 5 hours. It felt like half an hour, maybe. Yeah. And what a neat thing too, that hopefully we get the opportunity to really dive into whatever that is for each of us, and what a neat thing that you found that. I feel like I've found that at times. I don't know if I'm always there. I'd like to be there more. But yeah, like most artists I meet, it's like we have this deep, like innate drive to create, and if it's feeding, like it feeds the soul in so many ways, but it also, it creates beauty, and it adds value, and it brings goodness to the rest of the world around us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and even to the point where it is hard work. It can be hard work. I mean, your body, feels it when you become conscious again or aware of what's like. I mean, I can be really sore, and my fingers can be bleeding or whatever from working with clay, and so But so and it would possibly kill someone else. Accounting would do that for me.
Me too. Yeah, that's incredible. So how did you break into like actually selling the stuff? Like, you love to make it, you would lose yourself in it, but where did you make that connection to actually exchanging it for money?
That's awesome, Mark. That's a great question, because it takes me back to my brother and I were going to school in Helena, Montana. We lived in Roswell, New Mexico. We really weren't given many resources to do what we were doing. We were doing it on our own. So we had a little beat up Toyota pickup truck that actually ended up getting 500,000 miles on it. And we drove it to the junkyard backwards. And it was a farm truck. and it ended up having holes in the floorboard and everything. But anyways, that went back and forth to Montana a few times. But we were expected to make our own way. And I had all this pottery that I'd made, cups and bowls and mugs and everything else. And we didn't have any money for gas. And so we said, well, wait a minute. I've got all this stuff that Mom doesn't really want all this stuff either. And she could only use so much of my, pottery. And so we sat there with that Toyota truck. We put the tailgate down and we sold pottery to buy gas to get home. So that was the first business adventure that we did. So it was just necessity to fill up our gas tank. It was selling pottery. Like, how about four bowls and a mug? Will that buy me a tank of gas?
That's hilarious.
In the early '80s, yeah. And I I haven't thought about that, and but that was the first spark of making it a business, becoming a professional.
Hey, hey, that day a professional sculptor and potter was born, right?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
All for the sake of a gas tank.
Yes, exactly. To get, from Montana to New Mexico. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So,
Yeah.
so how did it evolve from there?
Let's see. From there, I went to school in Moscow, Idaho, finished school, and then I started doing some shows and art shows and craft shows. The Renaissance Fair in Moscow, Idaho, was a show that I did, and I realized that that I could make some money at this, and I had 4 different jobs, from everything from being a chimney sweep, delivering newspapers, having a new baby, and let's see, I was a chimney sweep with a top hat and tails. I was delivered newspapers, and I worked I worked at the paper, and then I also worked at a pizza place over in Pullman, Washington. So, and
Wow.
and then I also would do shows, with my pottery, and I was able to sell it. So it slowly
So
evolved from that.
where did Jamie come into all of this? How was she involved in the journey?
So I was a river guide on the river, and I guided with my best friend. He'd met a woman in New Mexico when he went on exchange to New Mexico State, and his girlfriend's best friend was Jamie, and she introduced me to Jamie, and so Jamie came up to the Idaho and took a river trip, and we started dating, and then fell in love, got married, and then she was with me in Moscow, Idaho, and we moved from New
Okay.
Mexico, and we said, I'm going to go finish a business degree in Moscow, Idaho. So yeah, that's how.
Okay. So, and then, it wasn't too long before you had a kid, and so you guys had, lots going on, and some good motivation to make some money, right?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Trying to figure it out on our own. And that was a really, challenging thing to do, to just move away from home, and that far away from home, from New Mexico to, Moscow, Idaho, and just make it on our own. And, just some of these decisions that I made, and not knowing, why, but just taking the risk and being courageous and being vulnerable, that changed everything. It always has for me. It seems like that's some of the wisdom that I've acquired, is, just saying yes and go, and pushing the envelope.
Yeah. I like that. Like, saying yes. And a lot of times when you're not really sure how that's going to work, but you're just like, we'll figure it out, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So, what are some of those ones that really stretched you early on?
Some of the ones that really what?
That really stretched you early on. What are some of the yeses that you said that that kind of pushed you, and helped you to grow and develop in the trade?
Well, those stretches were just continuing to do something different. So essentially, I have this utilitarian background. I feel like something needs to be purposeful or have some utilitarian function. And I think that came from, early on, that was ingrained in me. So I've stretched myself in a way that I continue to say, what can I do next? I mean, when I get complacent, or when I feel like I've become comfortable with something, I choose to get uncomfortable. And that goes from, I started doing raku. And so raku is an art form with clay in which the firing technique, you take it out of the kiln at about 1900 degrees, you pick it up with iron tongs and you put it into an airtight container with different combustibles to give it different colors and values. So it's a really fascinating thing. So that was a challenge to take, and I felt like I would take a piece of clay and I would put it through this really vulnerable process to get something that was just dynamic, and it looked like some old dug up treasure, but you lose. I was losing about 25%, and I could spend, a long time on a piece and getting it just right. And then I would raku fire it, and a lot of times it would break. And so,
wow,
that was the stretch, to just continue to recognize the fragility of I guess my whole next step, and pushing that through my artwork. It's like, this is life. It can work or it doesn't work. But if you push it to an extreme and make it dynamic and you have success, what a great thing, to be in that realm instead of just being on the sidelines or being safe. And so,
that's what I was thinking, is like that's risky stuff. Like 25%, that's big. That's huge.
I cried quite a few times because it's one of a kind, and you lose it. And
I would have been crying with you, Dave.
So that was a way that I continued to push myself. And when I would get comfortable or feel like I'd done all I could do in a certain area, I'd move on. And that has to do with, not really following a good business or financial or, money-making strategy, but just a more of a, I would say, just a spiritual strategy to continue to stay inspired and intrigued and moving, and so that's given me the ability to all of these things that I've done that have been a stretch has moved me to a place where I've got the results of what I have. I mean, taking a beautiful piece that's very mechanically done on a wheel and then altering it out of shape is this sort of dichotomy of that, playing it safe and then, stretching it essentially,
Yeah.
So.
Oh, there's so much good stuff here, Dave. Like, I think just with life in general, there's the times when we're opening ourselves up to the possibility of great rewards. Usually it involves some significant risk, and uncertainty, there's just like, there's no guarantee here, but let's try it, let's, because, nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's just like, we kind of have to have that mentality that, there's some skin in the game and there's a lot on the line. But man, if it works out, and some people may see that as being careless or maybe just, I don't know, like an adrenaline junkie,
Yeah.
but I think that there's a lot of power in that too, and trusting in just the reality that really without kind of that unknown factor, you really can't dive into new areas, right? You can't break out of what was into what now is, or what can be, right?
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, just stretching that limit to, I don't know. I really, I don't know. And I love having that attitude of not knowing and learning, being curious. That's more important to me, with innovation and imagination and curiosity. Um, those things are definitely unknown. And I feel like we live in a world where we're supposed to know, or that's the path you follow. And I'm not sure if we're going to learn anything new, or I'm going to learn anything new if I do that. So,
Yeah.
I have taken a lot of risks there.
Yeah. So when did your work start shifting? Because you were very much a potter, and then it evolved much more into sculpture, and like the piece right behind you, this beautiful bison piece with it's the vessel, and you've got this bas relief bison that circle around the entire thing. And how did that come about? Because I don't know anybody else that does something like that besides you, Dave.
Yeah, it continued. Working with clay, I would always alter the vessel. And I feel that now I really feel like that's a metaphor. We're all altered in some way, and we're stretched in some way. Even if we try and keep safe, that's a stretch, because we're going to pay for it maybe on the inside, feeling the safety of not doing anything and taking any risk, and having the reward or the feeling of accomplishment from doing that. So, but it evolved. I made drums. At one time I was watching Sesame Street with my kids, and I had this idea of doing a face mask and then making a ring and putting it in a drum. So, having your face on the backside of a drum. So that took up a couple of years, that idea that came to me like that. So, and
Wow.
I still have a few of them around that are, just, I'm amazed that transpired. And I don't know where that comes from. I feel like I'm just a vessel, and it just comes through me,
Yeah.
it's somewhere in there, intangible. It's not about anything. It's essentially that awareness, that consciousness, paying attention to it. When a seed comes up, it faces towards the sun, so that awareness or consciousness comes through me, and I keep taking risks. And then I try to be available to what is and what happens. I had an antler fall off of a shelf onto a vessel of mine, and it was this big vessel, and it fell and made this impression. And at that point I was like, oh, at first I was going to just, okay, game over, trash the piece. And I went, wait a minute, this is something that I can work with. And so I continued to alter it and utilize it, and work with it, and even punch through, and like I had bison on the inside of the vessel punching through, so their horns were coming out. And that piece I took to the show at Weems, and that's what won Best of Show. And
Wow.
the story began with a mistake, an antler falling on a piece,
Yeah.
and so continuing to just be aware of where the energy's coming from, where the sun's coming from, and pay attention to it and utilize it as best I can. So I had been altering pieces, and to me too, the vessel being altered with bas relief, with a refined artwork. I started doing that in clay, and just firing them. And then I realized I was spending so much time with these pieces that I wanted to cast them in bronze. And then they've just created all kinds of stories and metaphors. The whole idea of being utilitarian was I went from drums to lamps and these were the drums were high fired clay, the lamps were low fired raku, and they had all kinds of things from bones sticking through them to antlers in them, and lots of two-dimensional artwork that I'd paint on with a glaze. And then it slowly continued to evolve. But I'm still, Mark, it's interesting because I'm still in a realm of functionality or utilitarianism, being that these are vessels. So a vessel is a container, that something held or cherished or valued. So I'm still in this utilitarian mode, even though I'm recognizing the importance of the utilitarian part is also intangible on the inside. And so that's been a transition too, is, it just doesn't have to be functional in a way that I can use it on the outside. It's also a functional thing that I can use on the inside. And so the vessel is that it's got this intangible space on the inside that makes up who I am. That intangible stuff, where does it come from? I don't know. It comes. Yeah. We can call it God, we can call it spirit, we can call it consciousness, but that's the art part for me, is that aspect. So.
Yeah. Oh, this is some deep stuff, Dave. I love it. I absolutely love it, and I'm absolutely inspired by the way that you're working, and I feel like I want more of that magic in my work, and how do you, because I feel like in life we have this tug of war between, I have all these responsibilities, I have bills to pay, real life is knocking on my door all the time, and I've got this creative nature that I just got to make stuff, and so how do you find the balance between, maybe it is like the business aspect and that love, like where do you kind of bring that together?
So the balance between business and art and doing that. So I've been working with foundries quite a bit lately, and the foundries are, they're phenomenal as far as the work those guys do, and they're artists in and of themselves. And so there's a lot of the business aspect of this and making a living at it is the challenge for me. Like I said, it would really hurt to do accounting, whereas I can sit at a wheel for 16 hours and work or work, on a sculpture or something like that. So the foundry aspect is to reproduce or recreate a limited edition of my sculpture. And this last spring, I just installed a sculpture in Pagosa Springs, a large trout native, which was fun. And once again, continues to circle around with story and different narratives and different ways in which it really, provides a lot to the community as well as myself, as well as the business of it. But so working with my foundries has been challenging because there are about 9 important steps that you do in foundering, from the original clay, and that original clay for me can be either a water-based clay or an oil-based clay. And then from there, that clay is molded. And from that mold, you make a mother mold, and you can follow the process. But I had a gentleman, a wonderful guy, and I took he and his wife to the foundry and showed them the whole process for about 4 days. And when we left, he was a college president, an attorney, a judge, a banker, a really brilliant man. And he said, when we left, he said, "Dave, I've been here for 4 days studying this whole process, and I still don't get how they do this." And so it just gives you the idea of this complexity of that work that the foundry does. They do an incredible job, and each step has to be done correctly in order for the next step to be accomplished, or else it either doesn't work out, or it can be more work in the long run. And so that's a big business side of it, and it takes a lot of time for me to make sure all those steps are in place. And then there's a big financial commitment. And so foundries are, I continue to stay really loyal to the foundries that I have here in the United States. So I don't want to, there's a lot of places abroad that are looking for business, for foundry business, and I'm not interested in that. If I do foundry work, I want it to be here in the U.S. Yeah. So that's something that I do that takes time and energy and financial resources. It's expensive to do the foundry, and it continues to get more expensive, I think, just with finding good, hardworking craftsmen and artists to run the foundry. So that business aspect of it is really I'm not good at those challenges. I'm good at a challenge where I can work through a piece or a sculpture for hours and look at the silhouette of it, but to manage or to account for that reproduction is a challenge for me. But I'm the only one that can do it. So that does take away from the balance and Mark, as we were talking about earlier, just honing in on how much time we have as artists and in business. And so what's going to be the most important aspect of that? And so I'm really working at balancing that. I'm really working to find the time to stay in that state that I'm most useful to the world, and stay out of this state where I'm not, and that I'm more challenged. So that balance continues to be more of a focal point for me. And the foundries are great, but they're a lot of time and they're a lot of expense. So even though they can reproduce an edition for me, and get to a point of somewhat more streamlined, it costs a lot of money for me to have a piece finished,
from an outsider's perspective, I know a lot of sculptors, and just interacting with lots of artists at different art events, and some of just good friends, and we had a foundry here close to where I live in Cody, Wyoming. It burned down. There was a fire and it burned down, and the owners that had been running it for decades just decided that it was time to just end, to close our doors. And just because it had, like, over the last several years, it's been getting harder and harder and harder to kind of, like you said, to find those good workers and to keep it running well. It's just gotten harder and harder and harder. And now, the artists that were using this foundry have to go somewhere else. And there's just a lot of challenges, it sounds like. And I'm really grateful that I'm a painter. And I'm not trying to sound mean or rude at all, or even egotistical, but I'm just grateful that I don't have a lot of those problems, and I'm so glad. But it's a challenge for any sculptor who wants to really create sculptures and bronzes. And do you have any, like, recommendations as far as what somebody who's kind of young getting started, what they could, like, how could you help them to kind of navigate some of those waters?
I would say, this is my perspective, and I know sculptors that are doing really well and do really well with the foundries and selling their work. So I can glean off of knowing that and knowing them too in this answer. And I would say, clay is inexpensive, and you can, or the oil-based clay is a little bit more expensive, but a water-based clay is less expensive. And there are so many resources out there now. What a incredible world we live in for having any kind of resource at our fingertips now, really.
Yeah.
And so just to learn and to grow and to extend whatever spirit or bliss we have, so I'd say get to know some of those resources, educational resources, and get some clay and sculpt. Because if you find something that is attractive to a lot of people, or attractive, and you're good enough, cast it and go to a foundry and have it cast, and talk to the foundry. Foundries are really awesome about working with you. Now, and I think also you could have them, you could have a piece that's pre-cast, so it's sculpted in clay if you're in a gallery, and that's a great, result of how people respond to it and whether they want to collect it or not. So you can take it in and have all these sculptures and sell them before they're cast. So that'd be a recommendation. But I'd say just sculpt. And there are great resources as far as there's workshops too, the great sculptors that give good workshops. I know all these things cost money and time, but I feel like if you have that propensity or ability or gift to be a good sculptor, go for it and be the best, and don't look back. But it will take time and energy, and the payoff will be in the future.
Yeah, I like that. And the whole concept of the precast is you create these sculptures that are in their raw form. That's how you've created it as an artist. And I think collectors probably even love seeing that. Like, this is the original, work of art that has been crafted by this artist. And then, it's like, well, if you want to order a bronze, you take orders, and then your foundry costs are covered before you even have it done. That makes total sense. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a great way to do it. And if you do it if you start and learn how to work out of water-based clay, you could actually fire that. I've sold original pieces that are just one of a kind. They're my sculpture, And so I could actually fire and glaze a piece of a water-based clay, and it's a finished piece. And then even to the point where I could have it cast in bronze too, molded and cast in bronze if I wanted to. But
yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like it's really, you're limited by your creativity, is what it comes down to.
You are, and dedication and perseverance.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's funny. I find myself, as I'm growing and developing as an artist, and just the things that I'm trying to do in my career, and, with the podcast and some of my online courses and things like that I'm pursuing. I kind of hit a wall, like I don't know where to go, or I'm just kind of stuck somewhere. And it's like, well, how can we think about this differently? Right. And you start just, I think sometimes it's those dead ends that we run into that sometimes are the best thing that we need to kind of get us a little bit desperate, so that we can, and then our creativity just like kind of explodes. I think by nature, we need to solve problems as a species, as these people. And I found that some of my dead ends have been like the beginnings of some of the best things, because it forced me to find a way to make it work.
Yeah. That is huge, Mark. I wholeheartedly believe in that. What a great way to say it is, it's that intensity, that energy that elevates, because we need to change. We need to figure out different results, and even to the point where I feel like that is our goal, like you said, as a species, to continue to decipher different creative, innovative ways to move and come around to a better way, and that to me is comes through art. Whether, I mean, we're visual artists, but it can come through any art, whether it's literature or performing arts or anything else. We're learning, and that's our superpower. That's vital to our future. I really feel like that. It is in the arts, whatever art form that takes on is, and even Einstein said it. I mean, he said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And we're in a world where, there's a lot of people here. And as far as anyone, I've seen huge warehouses of people in China reproducing masterpieces, of artwork, but they don't have the ability to imagine something different or be creative. And so all these people are doing this, but our true strength is not in the knowledge of how to do it. It's in the imagination of being stuck and what we do next, how we come up with a new solution, a new result that really, gives us a whole new light, Yeah.
So I think it would be safe to say that rather than being really, I don't know, it can be hard at times, obviously, when you hit a wall, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't remember the last time that I hit one of those, even, metaphorically speaking here, that I really enjoyed it. But in the end, it's that determination and that grit to just say, you know what, I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to figure this out. And then and then you start to even just ask the question, like, how could I think of this differently? How can I approach this differently? And it's crazy, sometimes it takes a few days of struggle, but usually those ideas start to come. You start asking questions, and it's like, what about this? And I don't know what it is, but I kind of think it's inspiration, and, like you said, call it what you want. But it's like solutions come. And I think as long as we trust in that process, and don't throw in the towel, that solutions will present themselves in some way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the bigger and harder the wall, I feel like the bigger the solution and inspiration come,
Yeah.
and I am really hardworking and perseverant, even to the point where, it costs me a lot when I can just shift or adjust or be open, to a change that may be different too. But I feel like that has gotten me to different places. Maybe it's cost me in some ways, but it's also gotten me above and beyond. I had this one vessel I had on the wheel for about 6 months, and I was sculpting on it and working on it, and it lost its integrity. So water-based clay has the challenge of losing integrity when it gets and it fell on the floor, and it was really, really difficult to deal with that. But then once I got back to it, it became a better piece. I worked on it and recreated it, and it was better. And that's just a metaphor for something concrete, but I feel like that has to do with metaphorically hitting a wall too. Is that it's a challenge, but it becomes a better solution once you get on the other side of it. Yeah. And to me, Mark, that's being a true artist. I see a lot of people working and they're so comfortable financially and what they're doing and selling it and everything else. And that's awesome too. But I'm in some respects, I'm not that person. Once I get real comfortable, I'm ready to challenge myself or move to a different place. And a lot of times that's cost me because I could be so comfortable staying where I'm at. But I don't.
It's tempting, and we've got our brains just naturally want to be comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Our brains have that natural inclination of what feels good,
Yep.
and I'm going to avoid pain, anything that hurts, and I'm going to conserve as much energy as possible here, and so we're going to be constantly fighting that reality of we've kind of got this crazy roommate always in the back of our brains, that's always hanging out, and he's like, no, you don't want to do that. Don't try. Like, just do what you're doing. Like, why waste your time and energy? Like, come on, let's party instead, or whatever,
Just be relaxed and comfortable.
Yeah. It's this alter ego in a really bad way that we just need to always be fighting, that's kind of our worst enemy to becoming and growing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So let's shift gears a little bit here, Dave.
Sure.
So as a professional artist, you're making, you're selling your sculptures. I'm assuming, you've got art shows, different venues, different, different like museum shows. I don't know if you sell to just private collectors that you've made over the years and you market to them. What are some of the avenues that you feel worked best for you as far as sales? And how have you kind of developed some of that stuff?
I am good at visiting with people one-on-one, and I can be good at gallery talks and stuff like that. So I've done some gallery shows, and I've done some shows. I did the Celebration of Fine Art down in Arizona.
Okay.
With Susan and Jake Potager, and they are great. And that was really a great challenge for me to be just available for 7 days a week working in that studio down there, and anybody can pop in at any time. So that really, I feel like, did wonders for my ability to sell and to sell my work and have people see it for what it is. Other artists have done that too. A guy named John Coleman, he's a sculptor. He did that show years ago. So it's a great show. Yeah. So it's a fantastic.
I didn't know he had done that. That's impressive. I don't know about you, but massive respect for him as an artist. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah, he does wonderful work, and he's really done a great job with. Yeah, I really admire his work. And just lots of other sculptors. Scott Rogers did the show. He's a great sculptor. Paul Reimer, Bryce Pettit, all great sculptors. So I feel like that was something that really changed my ability to sell and as a business. And then I also joined the Society of Animal Artists and the National Sculpture Society. So I feel like that's something that is important, in whatever your medium is or whatever you do, to seek out that national level of a society and become a member of that or work towards membership in that. It's a clarification on the outside and the inside. It really legitimizes you on the inside as well as the outside. And then I visited with the Briscoe Museum and showed them my work. And quite frankly, Mark, I never really thought that this sculptural work, like these vessels with bas relief, would be accepted into the mainstream of a museum or artwork, because it's not really sculpture, and it could not be considered three-dimensional sculpture, and it's not considered a two-dimensional painting. So I felt like I was somewhere in between. So I was really grateful that Michael Duchemin at the Briscoe Museum recognized it. And for me, it's the hardest work I do. I can do a monumental sculpture, and there's actually an ability to determine its correctness. For me, I can make sure it's going to be sculpturally, compositionally, anatomically correct and have the right essence to it. Whereas a bas relief, where it's a foreshortened relief, is more difficult. So, and that has also to do with people being aware of it. Most people know what an oil painting is, but hardly anybody knows what a bas relief sculpture is. Like, what is that? How do you do that? I also have done bas relief in glass. I worked with glass for a while too, and I did sculptures. So I'm grateful that the Briscoe took me on in their show. The Idlejourg also did, and the Autry did, Masters of the American West, and they all three of them have collected pieces of my work that has to do with the bas relief on the vessel. So I'm just grateful and amazed that transpired, because it is, I know that it's, and other people that do bas relief, and that has to do with just the foreshortened sculpture on a coin, looking at Lincoln, all that is just a small raise in that metal that makes the relief. And it's one of the hardest forms of art that I've ever done. And I know that other people say that too. So you don't see that much bas relief around. And then I've taken it a little bit further, where it's been, the piece looks pliable, malleable, flexible, where I've made the artwork interact with the piece itself. So those things I've done, and the museums have become aware of them, and I'm grateful for that. But in general, Mark, it is harder, and I'm saying this, it's harder for the general public to see the value in this. They just don't, So when I do a three-dimensional sculpture of a goat or a raven, people are like, oh yeah, they immediately are able to connect with it. But this harder work that I do with the vessels that I see, or as you well know, there's artists who are artist art, that do artist art, and then there's artists that do sort of public art, that you can get away with, and that's okay. It's all part of the complex tapestry that works. But so I do have galleries, I do have museums, I do shows. There's a show in Sun Valley that I've done, and those are all ways that I sell my work, and work towards making a living at it, the business aspect of it. So, yeah. And so, some galleries do better than others.
Yeah, that makes sense. So,
and then you're right, Mark. I do have a collector, people that have collected my work, and I've been able to spend time with and visit with about my work. Those people are the best. The best gift I have as far as making a living at this. I mean, it's just fantastic to connect with somebody and they recognize the value and see it, and I can talk about my work, and then it's like it's a lifelong thing. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. How if there's a young artist out there who just really wants to dive into the sculpture world, and what are some ideas on like where to start? Maybe they just they love to sculpt. Maybe they've even had a couple little bronzes made. What else would you recommend they do to kind of get their foot in the door in the professional realm?
Yeah, I like I said, the National Sculpture Society would be important to just start working in that direction. And when you work in that direction, it does help you move in more of a business way, or at least it did me. So I would recommend just vulnerability and courage and accepting feedback from other artists. Reach out to other artists, whatever your medium is, if you're a sculptor, and get critiques. One thing that was most valuable to me that a guy told me that was a great sculptor. He said, I'll never tell you what works with this piece, but I'll tell you everything that doesn't work with this piece. And that is profound, because as an artist, nobody wants to tell you what doesn't work with your art. And so the most valuable thing you can have is a good constructive critique of your work. That's to me, it's so valuable. And I tell artists that when they come and ask me, what do you think about my work? I say, I'll tell you everything I think that doesn't work with your work, but I won't tell you anything that does work, because your grandma will tell you that, or all your friends, or you'll tell yourself, because so I would say look for critiques, but those people have to be people that are qualified and in the arena themselves. I mean, I like a quote or that statement about Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena. Or
I love that.
The women in the arena. Yeah, they've got to have put in their time and have their scars and mud and blood all over, in order to have something worthwhile to listen to. So in that respect, I would say reach out and continue to risk and ask people how they do it, and ask for critiques and the possibilities of having something cast and sold and what that's worth. And then I would say just keep working and take workshops or seek out different instruction that will give you that step up. And you never really know until you know. And then once you know, you go, oh, I feel like, as a professional artist, I can look at a lot of work and see different things, but I'm not going to tell anyone unless they ask. And then I'll say, this is what I'm going to do. Can you handle that? And they'll say, oh yeah, or no, thanks. But when you see it, and I had my big monumental piece that went in front of City Hall. The head was put on at a little bit of a down tilt that didn't work, and the timeline was really tight. And I went in there with a plasma cutter and just zipped the head off. And the guy working on it says, "You know what this means?" And I said, "Yeah, I know exactly what it means." And he said, "What?" And I said, every time I look at that, it's not going to be painful because we're going to get it right. And he said, no, this means we aren't going to get it done in time. And I said, yes, we are. But the first thing it means is I'm not going to stand for it, looking like that. So,
that's hilarious.
So,
but it shows a real commitment to making sure that the work is solid. And like I have, as a painter, I'm looking for things that bother me, when I'm looking at my work, and I use a mirror in my studio that helps me to see it objectively. And I'm looking for things that just feel like they're distracting, they're off, they're weird, like just that bothers me in any way. And I'm going to change it. I'm going to fix it until it doesn't. And there's probably a million right ways to solve that problem to get it to where it doesn't bother me anymore. And so it's just, and anyway, like I love that, that whole concept of being willing to accept feedback. And I've always kind of kept the what's the word, the phrase in my head. It's like, if you can't accept constructive criticism, like you will not grow. Like your growth is over. Yeah. And until we have the ability, and that it's hard. Like it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. But it's just the reality that like our work needs help. And a lot of times, because we're so close to the situation emotionally, we need an outside perspective to figure out how to get it to that next level. And it might even just be like 2%. It might just like some of those little tweaks, like you said, it's just a tilt in a head. That was it.
Minuscule.
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you might have had to mess up some of those really cool like clay marks that you had put in there that you thought were really cool, but why sacrifice the success of the whole for this little thing that you kind of fell in love with, your little pet chunk of clay, right?
Mark, that's incredible because you really nailed it. I had to cut it off right across his Adam's apple, and his Adam's apple was really, really prominent, and I paid a lot of attention to it. And so the plasma cutter had to go right across there, and I was like, oh, I can't believe you hit that, because that's exactly where it was. And so, yeah, I feel like that's important, and it's important to be able to be uncomfortable or to open yourself up to that vulnerability of being critiqued, but seek out the people that you respect and admire. And when you do, and you can have that, it's intimate. It's very intimate to have. I mean, to me, I equated doing artwork and bringing things from the inside out, which I feel like that's a metaphor for our world and our country and everything else. Don't let things come from the outside in. Let things come from the inside out. And so these things that we do come from the inside out. And so that's about as personal as it can get, and then you sit there with all this stuff out there. And I early on, I was sensitive, and it was difficult to be that exposed. Now, as a professional, not so much at all. I mean, somebody may come in and, critique my work without me asking them if they would. That's okay. It doesn't bother me, or whatever transpires, I'm not really affected by, unless you're one of the guys in the arena with me and have gained the respect. Then it becomes intimate, vulnerable, and really important. And that's where I would look for that, because that's where growth and change occur. And and so there was something along that line that I was thinking. Anyways, that is a valuable thing that we can move towards. Oh, so with sculpture, and I love the mirror too, Mark. That's awesome. Using a mirror to determine what doesn't work with the painting. Sculpture's somewhat different in the dynamic that it's 360 degrees this way and it's 360 degrees that way. Maybe not this way sometimes, because you have it sets on something. It could be close to that. Some sculptures are set up that way. But so, and any one degree or half a degree or any view, 360 this way or 360 this way, is something that I may never even see again. So I have pieces in my studio, and I'll continue to turn them and look and sit back and look at different levels and look at their silhouette. And I may not even, if I see something that doesn't work or that's wrong, I mark it right then. And so I'll get back to it, or I'll fix it right then in order to do that, because there's unlimited amounts of views that come into play with sculpture, which is pretty interesting. Yeah. So from the perspective of a painter, and just even talking about it being interesting from every angle in three dimensions, just makes me like
it just makes me churn inside. And I'm so glad that I have this flat surface, and all you have to worry about is somebody standing right in front of it, up against the wall, no other angles. Oh, like,
And Mark, it's just the opposite for me. I churn working to do it on two-dimensional. It is so challenging for me, and to be able to get around it, it's like, some kind of whatever awareness that's easy, but to do it flat and make it look dimensional, that makes me squirm. So that's my challenge. So I'm working in that challenging area a little bit more nowadays too.
Yeah, it's funny. In the end, I think we like to have our own problems, right? Yeah. Let's say you have an artist who is working really hard. They're growing. They're getting awesome feedback, and they're taking it. They're absorbing it. They're changing, and they're improving, and they're growing. Would you say, like, okay, at that point, let's start applying for galleries, let's start applying for shows? Like, how would that continue to help them to become a professional?
I would say absolutely apply to shows, and shows are the best way. I mean, I know a lot of artists say, I'll make the stuff, but I'm never going to sell it, or I don't want to sell it. Well, that was like my son buying an old Volkswagen van saying, I don't want to be a mechanic. He needed to be. He couldn't afford to do it any other way. And so that's that stretch, is getting out there and doing, and I would say apply to shows. Absolutely apply to shows, because you learn so much. And with the gallery aspect, I mean, I've been in so many galleries that, or approach galleries that don't even give me the time of day, a lot of times. And this is a story, I've been at a gallery in Jackson Hole that did not even give me the time of day, so to speak. And then they came to the show in Jackson Hole and went, oh my goodness, where have you been? This is incredible work, da, 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 da. And they took me on in the gallery, but they didn't remember that I was in there 3 days ago showing them my work. So the recommendation for that is attraction rather than promotion, because if you go try to promote yourself, it doesn't work. But if they're attracted to you somehow, some way, so however you can try and figure out how to create that, it seems like when I approach galleries there's not much interest, but when they come to me, there's a lot of interest in that. And that starts with shows. That I would say do a show in, Park City, Jackson Hole, wherever. I mean, depending on what your artwork is and the description of it, where it fits. If it fits in the Mountain West or Southwest or East, just start doing shows. Yeah. So.
You'd probably recommend that they find shows that work well with their work, and just be persistent with it until they land something. But I guess it makes sense to me that you apply for the show, you get it, and then you start getting into some stuff. Like, once things start to take, you're probably going to start making connections at those shows. You'll start networking, and that attraction stuff. People will be attracted to you and your work.
Correct.
And then more opportunities arise. Is that kind of how it plays? Is that what you've seen in your work?
I've seen that a lot in my work, and it's amazing how many different opportunities arise, and how many things that you could never imagine transpire at a show, even to the point where that show in Jackson where I approached the gallery, this was years and years ago, and they just had no interest. And then they show up at the show, that person shows up, the gallery owner shows up at the show and just like, oh my goodness. And it's like, are you kidding me? And then I was in the gallery. So you can't even make it up, what transpired. I mean, I have people show up, at shows, and even little show, I'll do a little show in Sun Valley, and I've had, all kinds of people show up, for all kinds of reasons, and crazy stuff has happened that can't even imagine, I could tell some really just a funny story.
Well, now you have to.
I do have to. So a red-tailed hawk is essentially the same composition as an eagle.
Okay.
Basically they're pretty close. Their markings are different. Their color is different, but they're fairly close. So I've been working with a red-tailed hawk, and I love the indigenous nature of a red-tailed hawk, and I've got some bronzes down, and I worked with this red-tailed hawk, and I had it at a show in Sun Valley for years, and everybody would come by and go, wow, look at that eagle. That's such a great eagle, and I'd say, well, it's actually a red-tailed hawk, and oh, I wanted an eagle. Okay. So I reworked this hawk in clay and made it had created a little bit different compositions and then patinaed it as an eagle. This is like, years I've had this hawk and this this edition of this red-tailed hawk. Well, I patinaed it as this bald eagle, and this guy comes by and he stops and he looks at Jamie and he says, do you have any red-tailed hawks? And Jamie looks around at the show and she's like, somebody's playing a joke, because I see your eagle up there, but I'm looking for a red-tailed hawk. And and so I come, and this guy is somebody that everybody knows. And he's a really, really famous guy. And he said, no, that we have the eagle, but he said, oh, well, sorry, I was looking for a red-tailed hawk, and I really wanted a red-tailed hawk. So I got all his information and called him and told him, I also sculpt red-tailed hawks, but they're really close in composition and similar, and so that kind of stuff happens that you just can't even imagine,
Yeah.
So, and I've had really challenges starting out at shows. I mean, when I first started doing shows in Jackson Hole, 20, 30 years ago, I created my whole booth space, and I thought, I'm going to make this out of angle iron. It's going to be sturdy and everything else. I made a marine canvas, but it was sort of had a pink hue to it. I thought that color would look really nice. Well, I didn't think through it very well. We had the worst rainstorm you can imagine in Jackson Hole. The marine canvas held water really well, so I had a pool essentially on the top of my booth, and I had to cut the marine canvas to flood it. They had hay bales. I mean, I've had disasters and incredible disasters, that you just work through and, lick your wounds, clean up, learn, and move on. So you've got to
chalk it up to experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's not going to be easy, but you could, I would say a young artist is starting out, they can learn a lot with a podcast like this, and moving forward in a way that works well, that they can make a living at it, and I am unique, Mark, as far as I think a lot of sculptors can make a foundry work really well. And just the combination of my unique work and the foundering of that, and then the combination of it not being mainstream, where 99% of people that walk in, they see it as a traditional sculpture. They don't. There's very few people that see it as even as a bronze. So they go, "What is that made out of?" So so
that makes sense. This has been such a good conversation, and I think I'd say that some of the biggest takeaways for me have been just the always seeking to find that sweet spot of what is the most exciting for me and the most engaging for me as an artist, and to grab a hold of that with everything, right? Mm-hmm. And then also how important it is that we take risks and we put ourselves out there and we become vulnerable, so that we can receive good feedback and constructive criticism to help us to grow, and to see things that we currently aren't seeing. And then to see obstacles as opportunities rather than just, something that we get really frustrated about and want to quit, recognize it as an opportunity to shift, to pivot or something like that. And just, be willing to go through the process of kind of whatever it takes until you find success. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. What, if there was anything else you wanted to kind of, give to the audience, maybe the last couple words of advice or just words of wisdom, what do you think you'd say?
I guess that is it. Continue seeking and searching and being open and being vulnerable. That would be the biggest thing. And taking risks. Call somebody, reach out to somebody that you admire, that you admire their work. They may have time for you. They may not. Don't take it personally, but go. Go that direction and continue that direction if that's what you want. I would say also that just there's a few books. There's a book called, have you ever heard of Art and Fear?
I've heard of that. Yeah. Yep. And I think I've actually read it. It's been a long time, but I'm pretty sure I read it.
That's an old book that I really appreciate. There's another book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. Okay. And that's a awesome book for any, and I mean, he is a writer, but it translates exactly the same for a visual artist. It's amazing how well it translates, for a visual artist. And so The War of Art, those are just things I would recommend. And then following that, I'm rewatching something that I watched when it first came out, and it's called The Power of Myth by Bill Moyer is interviewing Joseph Campbell. So I'd recommend that. It will spark all kinds of different avenues and interests. But I would say follow that whisper, that voice that don't follow just the financial part of it, or follow what's inside, and that's hard to do in this culture and in this world. Is to follow that bliss. But I would say that's where you're going to find satisfaction, because if you just follow it for whatever, the ego or the money or whatever else, that's not going to get you there in the end, and it'll actually get you at a dead end where you're like, oh no. So I would say that's the follow your own interest and your own bliss and figure out what that is. There's another book called The Art of the Impossible by Stephen Kotler. Yeah. So those are all just things that I feel like would really bring up some inspiration and innovation in how you're going to do it, or the motivation and the process to move forward with whatever you're.
I hope you guys are taking notes. Like, write that down. Okay. I'm taking notes too. Like, this is great stuff. And I think I'm always looking for stuff to listen to or to read. I think, just kind of a mindset of always learning and looking for inspiration like that. And this is phenomenal, Dave. I can't even imagine where I would be if I hadn't really dug into some new book that was recommended, or there's so many things like that. This is phenomenal. Anything else, that you can think of?
Just gratitude for you asking me to do this podcast and watching you, Mark, in your life and story, and hearing what you're up to. God, just fascinates me. So,
well, thank you.
Gratitude and thank you. Yeah. Feel really grateful to have this opportunity with you.
Yeah. Well, the honor and pleasure is all mine, Dave, and I'm sure for all the listeners that are tuning in, thank you so much for your expertise, your experience, and your real, just like your real tangible drive to do what you're passionate about and to pursue things that are different and scary in your work. You're doing stuff that I don't know any other artist is doing, and it's really inspiring, and it pushes me to want to do stuff like that, and to really look at myself and my work, and to see, okay, where can I start pushing boundaries here, and what can I throw in here that seems bizarre, but like, who knows, like, and kind of go with those gut feelings and trust some of those instincts. Because they can lead to some really wonderful things, and to different paths that really you can't find any other way. So, thank you so much, Dave. Thanks everybody for listening in. Write down those books. And anyway, thanks so much, guys, for being a part of this podcast and for supporting this endeavor, and keep painting, keep working, keep sculpting, and hopefully we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Art podcast. If you're interested in resources and education to help you successfully create art and then sell it, please check out the Business of Art course in the link below. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.